If only Harry were next in line, said a source close to Harry. John CRACE makes an absolute mockery of SCOBIE's latest book, Endgame, and we are loving it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the King YouTube channel. Now, The Guardian is not typically a media outlet that favors the royal family. In fact, they're usually pretty critical of the royal family. The Guardian is pretty left-leaning, in fact. But lately, they have been on it when it comes to SCOBIE's new book of garbage called Endgame. See, the problem with SCOBIE's book is that it is so over the top, it is so ridiculous that no one can take it seriously. And so in this video, my friends, I'm going to share with you some of the highlights of John CRACE's satirical article about SCOBIE's book Endgame. And if you're anything like me, you are going to be doubled over laughing. Alright, so he starts off with, "It was a warm September day in 2022. Expectation hung heavy in the air and around the green and verdant lawns. I was attending a remedial writing course when the phone rang. It was the call that I had long feared. I immediately donned my black polyester suit. 'Is that you, Omid?' said a frail yet familiar voice, one that I recognized immediately. 'It is indeed, Your Majesty,' I replied, throwing myself prostrate. 'I have some very important news for you,' the Queen continued. 'I'm afraid I haven't been feeling well at all recently. Seeing that half-wit Liz Truss on Tuesday was the final straw. The country has gone to the dogs. So I have decided that I'm going to die at 3 o'clock this afternoon. You are the first person I've told, and I would like you to keep the news to yourself until I can get hold of Charles. Goodbye and good luck with your terribly important book.'" I mean, right out of the gate, John CRACE is calling out Scooby-Doo for his absurd claims that he is somehow an insider and knows all these royal secrets that nobody else has access to. I mean, the book really is that over the top, though. That's the funny thing about it. Yes, this is satire, but the book itself should be satire. So then, a little bit further down, we get this gem, cliche after cliche tumbled into my head and onto the page. You know, that's the thing about the book. It's so poorly written. I mean, of course, I haven't read it, but trust me, friends, I have read more than enough excerpts. I don't need to read the whole thing. Scooby-Doo writes like a teenage girl. He has this weird, breathless writing style that doesn't make any sense for a man who is trying to pretend to be a serious journalist. Another great paragraph. "The monarchy was in great peril, rocked by accusations of bullying, misogyny, and racism. But not by me. It's not my fault the Dutch edition named those with unconscious bias." I love that he doesn't wait long to get into that. I mean, again, I'm not going to rehash that whole story because we've been talking about it a lot lately. But why did scabies believe that somehow he was going to escape blame in this whole naming the royal racist scandal? Of course it was him. Who else could it be? Of course, the day the Queen passed away featured heavily in SCOBIE's book. He claimed that poor Harry was left to fend for himself. He wasn't allowed to fly on the same private jet as his brother. He had trashed Prince William and his uncles, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward. And then even on the day of the funeral, the family was being so mean to Meghan and Harry. As John CRACE writes, "Even at the funeral, they cut lonely figures as the King and I led the country in mourning." Now, one thing I noticed John CRACE doing a lot in this piece is beginning with a description of the weather. I'm not sure if Scooby-Doo actually did that in the book, but I believe he did, probably so. So the next paragraph we get, "The sun was very bright. The king was all smiles as he did a royal walkabout. About bloody time, he told a group of well-wishers. At last I am the king." Yet the mood couldn't hold. Charles's legendary petulance was evident when he cursed his pen with a torrent of abuse. And there we have it. He had to throw in the pen episode. I mean, why are we expected to change our opinion of King Charles just because he got frustrated over a leaky pen? If that is the worst they can come up with, then the king must be a pretty good guy. And then John CRACE makes sure to mention the Lady Susan Hussey and Ngozi Fulani episode. He writes, "Soon Buckingham Palace was riven with scandal when a 112-year-old courtier asked a black woman where she came from." Soon, the only question on everyone's mind was, who were the royals who ruined Harry and Meghan's lives by asking what their baby might look like? Now, as the Dutch version has been published, I can tell you it was Charles and that cow Kate. Horrible, horrible attitudes that have no place in a modern society, said sources very close to Harry and Meghan. I do love how John CRACE is using all this sources close to Meghan and Harry, sources not close to Meghan. That is exactly what Scabies did in his book. I guess he thought that was going to cover his tracks and Meghan and Harry's too, that if he just said sources close to them, we were never going to guess that it might be Meghan and Harry themselves. John CRACE also points out that Scabies didn't really reveal any new information in the book. He writes, "Worse still, it was becoming increasingly apparent that I had no insights and could only recycle old rubbish for this book, but needs must. I was what the country expected." He really nails that self-important attitude that Scabies walks around with, doesn't he? And then on to the invisible children. "Do you want to see your grandchildren?" sobbed Harry. "Not really," said Charles. "I'm a bit busy this afternoon opening a fridge. Typically unconscious racist behavior." Well, I mean, come on now. How is Charles going to want to see a couple of grandchildren who don't even exist? If he wants to see some dolls, he can walk into a toy shop. And then another weather description. It had been one of those days when it had been neither sunny nor raining. And so we're getting to the Platinum Jubilee. And of course, John CRACE has a lot of fun with this one. He writes that Kate deliberately tipped a 9-year-old page girl over the balcony, sending her headlong to her death. Honestly, the reason I find this so hilarious and the reason that this is really good satire is because all the accusations made against Catherine in the book are this ludicrous. They really are that exaggerated, that over the top, that unbelievable. And then, inside the palace, no one was aware of what the weather was as I began another dreary chapter repeating every royal story that had ever been printed in the Sun and the Daily Mail. And I can exclusively reveal that all the royals spend every morning on the phone to quarter-witted royal correspondents such as me to brief against their royal rivals. Charles dithers as Michael Fawcett squeezes out an inch of toothpaste onto his brush while he sits on the lavatory, or something. And then we get to this description of William that obviously came from Harry himself. William, meanwhile, was plotting his own ascension. William is actually a complete bastard, just in it for himself, hates Harry, who only wants to serve. And then a little bit further down, worse, he couldn't even bring himself to talk to Meghan when she interrupted him. That is the measure of his bigotry. Plus, he is really lazy. If only Harry were next in line to the throne, said a source close to Harry. John CRACE also addresses this game that Scooby-Doo is playing, claiming that Harry and Meghan didn't help him with the book, but somehow having all kinds of information about Meghan and Harry's private lives that he claims is true. Okay, so if they didn't help him at all, how did he get the information? John CRACE, of course, puts his own spin on it, writing, "In the meantime, Harry was doing his daily 2 hours of unconscious bias training. Later, he didn't say to me, because I can categorically state that he and Meghan didn't help me in any way with this book, 'It's all so unfair, Omid. I'm only a jobbing millionaire. It's terrible that after I left the royals, I've had to do things for myself. Charles has even taken away one of my houses. All I want to do is protect my family by invading their privacy. Have you read Spare? I haven't. It's a bit long, and it hasn't got enough pictures.'" Well, I mean, we do know that Harry didn't write that book. Of course, they claim the ghostwriter did, but more likely it was Meghan and the ghostwriter writing together before the ghostwriter quit because the whole thing was such an absolute mess. I still remember all the jokes people were making before the thing was published, that it was going to be written in crayon or something like that. I mean, the bits that I did read, well, some were clearly written by Meghan because it was her typical gibberish word salad nonsense, and then some other portions were obviously written by Harry because they were written about like a 7-year-old would write. And probably the worst part of Omid Scobie's Book of Lies is the way that he so viciously attacked Catherine. Well, of course, John CRACE is going to address that as well. He writes, "So as the California apples ripen on the trees and Meghan and Oprah feed the multicultural chickens, let us turn our attention to Kate. What a cow! Imagine having her as queen. It's unthinkable. The monarchy will never survive Waity Katie, as sources close to everyone once called her. Let's get real. Her parents are dead common and her mum Carol practically pushed her onto William. Sent her to St. Andrews to bag the prince." He continues writing, "Well, good luck to her. You did it, gal. But her lack of grace shines through. Not only has she killed countless minor royals who have tried to upstage her, she once stepped out of a car several seconds ahead of Meghan, and then deliberately stood in a puddle to soak her rival. Yet the country lets her get away with it. Thank God for sources not close to Meghan for speaking their truth to me. Yet all the while Meghan says nothing, not wanting to rock the boat. her only desire to do her duty towards a country she once called home. He absolutely nails the tone, doesn't he? The entire book, but especially the portions that are dedicated to trashing Catherine, read like they were written by a 12-year-old mean girl, which I guess is what Scooby-Doo and Megan are. Clearly the two of them never grew up. They are stuck in middle school trying to bash their rival Catherine for being better than them. Of course, it wasn't only Catherine who was trashed in this book. It was also Camilla. Scabies really demonstrated his misogynistic tendencies by attacking Camilla for not being a pure virgin when she was young. I mean, slut-shaming in this day and age is a bit tiresome, but I guess the temptation to do so is just too irresistible to Scooby-Doo, so he indulges. In Endgame, he goes after Camilla by talking about her knickers. I mean, come on. He got nothing better to criticize her with? John CRACE's take, it was a windy spring day as Camilla shagged her way through the home counties during her teens and early 20s. There was no country seat where she didn't leave a pair of knickers, but she was happy to bide her time and now she is queen. And what a malign influence she is, chain-smoking her way through idle afternoons that are only interrupted by a game of drafts. Her one pleasure is to leak unfavorable stories about Harry and Meghan to her stooge at the Daily Mail. Oh my goodness, I don't know about you all, but sometimes this whole situation gets me a little stressed out. So personally, I found this piece to be so refreshing and absolutely hilarious. If you've got time, just go head over to The Guardian and read it for yourselves. You will not regret it. And you, what do you think of this piece of satire? Please let me know your opinion below in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video today, please don't forget to like and share with anybody else who would appreciate it too. And don't be afraid to click the subscribe button to get more updates in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in, have a lovely weekend, and we'll be back to see you all tomorrow.